What is up, fellas? JPS delivers here. Another episode. I believe it's episode number 8 so far of this season. It's going to be an away game in Atlanta against Devin Booker and the Cox. It's Pistol Pete right there in the I guess, what the fuck is it? Flyers. Fuck, I can't. Jesus, can't even think of the fucking name for it. But we're off to a great start so far. Game seems to be a pretty good matchup for D'Lo and company. Devin Booker shouldn't have that great a defense or anything like that. Jared Allen might have his hands full a tad bit. I think Al Horford is on this team. But, while I say that, gets himself a nice little putback. But, yeah, nice little slate of games tonight. It is Thursday, January 30th. We are already almost a month in to the year of 2020. And my God, could it have started any worse? Right now, I mean, not putting my own politics in it, but right now we got a president that, is right now under trial for certain offenses that I will say many other politicians have also gotten into. But let's just say that is already not a good start. And also, it hits home. We're watching some 2K gameplay here. Just into the game of 2K, just like, we love the game of basketball. We're huge NBA fans. We love to play as the players that we love to watch, their talents. And especially it seems like it comes to life even more that we get to play with a guy like Porzingis like that, even though he's not hitting that fadeaway jump shot. But it really hit home with 2020 news of, within the past week, we have lost one of the, one of the most iconic players in NBA history. You had a lot of people consider Kobe Bryant to be in the top 10, possibly top 3, top 5 at least. One of the best players, especially for someone of my age. Watching the guy, I'm a great Spurs fan, and with that, you start to respect guys like Dirk Nowitzki, guys like Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, these stars that your team is rivals with, and just great players like that with great team like San Antonio has had with the great franchise, it means that you're going to play a great competition consistently in the playoffs, and Kobe Bryant was definitely one of those players just by default. The guy even scored 60 points in his final game. Mind you, he probably shot about 120 times in that game against the Jazz, and also, as well as that, is at the Jazz team in that season 5 years ago. Seemed like at the beginning they were fighting for the 8th seed, and then I believe the team that they were depending on to lose ended up winning, making their chances 0. So it definitely made a nice recipe for a great finish to a great doesn't even do it justice, a great career of Kobe Bryant, a guy that, I heard Colin Cowherd in his metaphors we all get annoyed by, but it seemed like this was a nice, excuse me for the noise, recently just got myself a bulldog, little Sebastian. He's a cute little bastard, but he can be a little loud, especially when he's snoring at night, but it's a nice little bit of white noise, I'd have to say. That's my excuse, at least, for it. He's adorable, but just like the bulldog breed, they were raised to bite bulls and hang on to them. This fucker can't help but fucking bite and hold on to anything. His jaw is extremely strong, but hey, those English bulldogs, man, they're adorable dogs, and got lucky too. Basically like a hand-me-down, just someone needed to get rid of him, and he's only a year old, so we got to deal with him. But back to the Kobe stuff, it's just tragic to see a guy like him, a guy that you could see just what Colin Cowherd was saying, a guy that was more an artiste than any of these basketball players that we've seen in the past in the game, like a Tim Duncan. Fundamentally worked on his craft and stuff, but it just seemed like Kobe Bryant in itself was just the epitome of what you would have as an artist, just playing on a basketball court. It was a game of art when the man played, and not only that, he just showed great passion in his own craft and art. When it came, people talk about the Mamba mentality, baby, to where you're constantly working to get better. And, by default, nice little and one right there, D-Russ. Definitely going to be a fast-paced game. It's already 40 points pretty much halfway through the first quarter. But a guy that just constantly, and it was a good point actually made, is that, like we always talk about, like, douchebag tendencies and One of them would be like a high school guy giving himself a nickname or something, like a high school athlete who's, has great promise around school. A lot of people think he's a huge douchebag for the most part because he's the type of guy to make himself his own nickname. But think about it. Kobe did the same exact thing, but his nickname actually stuck, and it's going to live on forever. The Mamba mentality. Just let that sit in for a sec. Terrible choice. I shouldn't do that with Jared Allen unless it's like 5 feet away from the basket. But it's just that's just to prove the kind of artist he was. Is that not only was he amazing on the basketball court and just a thrill to watch, even if he was scoring 81 points on your team's Raptors. Now he had to deal with it then. You've officially had the most recent championship, so I guess that makes up a little bit for it. It'll always make up for it if Toronto gets a championship, which they did. But 81 points against your team, you can't help but just admire that. I'm sure Utah fans admired watching Kobe. The entire world admired watching Kobe on a basketball floor. Just definitely an icon for the sport. And just eventually, just with his personality, he's already become an icon in other fields. I mean, didn't he win an Academy Award, I believe, for his documentary that he helped, I believe, produce, right? I mean, it's just, for a guy that, for a little bit, a lot of people, love to hate him, it kind of seems at this point that, you could tell where the mood was for the entire, NBA world, the sports world, when he passed. Is that, it's kind of the idea, right, is that you don't really know what you feel about something until it's gone. And a lot of people hated Kobe Bryant a decent amount, especially through early part of his career. Even LA fans wanted Shaq instead of Kobe. Just with a guy like that is that when you have this tragedy happen, unfortunately, and losing his daughter too, you couldn't imagine what his family's going through. I mean, you don't want to imagine. As someone who gets intrusive thoughts and shit, that is just definitely something you just don't even want to deal with, even thinking for the sake of someone else. But of course, you use it as your means to care for them, to send sympathy towards them, dealing with such stuff. Nice little shot there, D'Lo. But it's just a terrible time, and really, even if he died when he was 60, it'd be a terrible time. And it makes it even worse, 41 years old. Because when you think about it, the type of Bill Russell and stuff, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, these NBA stars, and there's a good point made. I think, I'm not a big fan of Nick Wright, but he made a great point about saying that, basketball is the one sport that you've seen these old greats, and that kind of seems to be the case, right? Is that's the adjective used for these players, old greats, because these guys just retain their age. I mean, they seem to live forever. There's a good point made also by Nick that you have Wilt Chamberlain. I think he was saying only 2 other MVPs have passed away since that, and I believe what he was saying was Pistol Pete. I don't know if Pistol Pete Maravich, speaking of playing the Atlanta Hawks, but him and Wilt Chamberlain, or no, it was Moses Malone and Wilt Chamberlain. Besides Kobe were the 2 guys, and those are anomalies. Those are just huge rarity amongst the sport. In football, you've had Aaron Hernandez and stuff take his own life, and a lot of people are pointing to CTE, but in basketball, you really don't have that case. You're just having a sport to where their body might physically be worn out, but their minds don't seem to be. Nice little steal and little lay-in right there by Gary Harris. But it just seems like it's a sport to where it's quite physical. Of course it's physical when you got a guy like even Zion's coming into that could play quarterback or tight end in the NFL if he wanted to. Obviously if he worked hard enough at it, but he still has the body to give himself. It's like LeBron. LeBron has the body made. Kobe Bryant had a body made for the NBA, but he became great when he worked on his craft. It's just crazy to think that a guy like Kobe, that we're seeing him, venture out into other fields. Nice put back, Bojan, Jesus. But it's just, it's a sad sight, Death in itself is the ultimate truth. It's the one constant we can have in life, and what I mean by that is that some people can live terrible lives. Some people can live great lives. Some people can live mediocre legacies. Some people can have tarnished reputations. But there's one thing that's consistent amongst every person, is that we all pass away. And and unfortunately, for some of us, it seems like some people that we want to stay the longest seem to not live as long. It's kind of like, you think of the 27 Club for music and whatnot. The likes of, nice move, OG. You got the likes of like a Bradley Noel, you got Kurt Cobain, all these different, but Jimi Hendrix of all people. I think Janis Joplin as well. I think she's from Corpus Christi, Texas. Shout out to that. But you just think of all of these. When you have a guy like Kobe, you just don't anticipate to have that happen. And it's just, like I said, the one consistency in life is death, and that's unfortunately the worst part about it. And it's just unfortunate to see that when that one consistency hits home the hardest is when it happens too early. It's like a parent burying his or her child. Things shouldn't happen like that. And unfortunately, that's just the result of just the imperfect world we live in. We just got to deal with it, and the world will go on without Kobe. That's, to be honest, we'll remember him. The Mamba mentality will live on forever, just for the sake of the NBA and just what it's brought to the NBA, what he's brought to the NBA, increasing fandom, helping bring international players from Africa. Joel Embiid said that he didn't even start playing basketball 6-7 years ago until he was watching the 2010 NBA Finals when Kobe, I think, was playing the Boston Celtics. It's just stuff like that to where, it's not... Maybe that does help some people get through their everyday lives, is to watch someone not necessarily have to idolize. You don't have to idolize people. Let's be honest. You don't have to idolize people to enjoy them. Jesus, what a block. But it's the beauty of sports and music like that, is that it always seems to bring people together. You could sit next to anybody in any arena. I mean, hell, I've made, every time I was at an A&M game going to Texas A&M, I would always make friends with the people sitting around me. We were best friends for at least 3 hours, and usually 3.5 to 4 hours. And that's what sports does. Doesn't even matter if we were completely different, leaning on politics and whatnot. It's just sports does that to people. It's, no one I don't necessarily like to talk politics when I'm at parties and stuff like that, and especially when I was at parties in college. But the one thing I consistently talk about, people don't sit there and be like, oh, who's your top 5 presidents? People are like, dude, is Tom Brady or is Joe Montana the best fucking quarterback of all time? It's shit like that. Oh, do you think Tim Duncan or Kobe Bryant were better for their generation? Were better, generational basketball players in their own time period? That's the kind of stuff that sports brings to the table, and it just consistently in and out, day in, day out. It's a great part of our lives, and I think it's just a nice enjoyment that we get to bring, a nice camaraderie to each other, is sports. And I think someone like Kobe with his influence helped bring that, and all to the man. And I feel for everything that his family's going through as much as I can. Of course, it'll never parallel or even get near what I'm sure his wife and his 2 other children are dealing with, and also especially the families too. I know Kobe touched more people on like a fandom level, not really personally, but it seems like, and we've heard a couple anecdotes of people who knew Kobe just through a couple experiences of their children going to school with his children, that he had seemed that, like, even in the times that he was, just spent a couple encounters with these people, it's like people were talking about the wrecks near his life, that there one or 2 times that he's experienced bad wrecks. He's out there directing traffic, helping, bring down people's emotions, helping them, caress a little bit of their emotions, bring it down a little bit so they can handle and cope with their situation even better. It's just cool little stories like that on a personable level that you hear. That and another cool thing, the man never really wanted to talk about basketball when he was talking with other people. And I think that's kind of like the Bill Russell type thing, right? We think of, and it makes it even more sad, is that Bill Russell's perfect for that role, to where he's this older man growing up being such a mentor to so many different basketball players, so many different people. When you think of probably African Americans growing up in the civil rights era, the second civil rights era, in the late 1950s, 1960s, to where Bill Russell seemed like that type of guy to be a mentor, and Kobe seemed like that just in his own life, without even feeling any need to. He just wanted to, and that was nice to hear and comforting to hear, and I'm sure it's comforting to hear to his family, as we all need to realize that death is very sad, but however, it's the one consistency. So the best thing we can do is just reminisce on what a person, he or she's impact on our lives, when it comes to remembering them, when they pass away. And that's the best thing we can do, whether it's to cry, laugh, and cry at the same time. And I'm sure, didn't, got my eyes watering a little bit because it was just a weird situation. And I think that, it showed the great part about that is people realizing, sports bring us together. A moment like this is something that touches all of us, regardless if we are fans or not. So that's what I'll remember from the Kobe tragedy and stuff like that. And all it does too is just regardless of the reaction that we'll remember from tons of people coming together and dealing with this at the same time and comforting those involved and the families involved, unfortunately too, and the other children besides his daughter that passed away. That not only that, we can sit there and remember the great things that happened years and years before. It's a nice comforting feeling, and I think something that's gonna last forever. So tonight's slate, 6 games. We got a couple interesting games tonight. No, bud, stop it. Got a couple interesting games. I think the first one that starts off, out of the first 2, because I don't think Toronto and Cleveland will be that interesting whatsoever. I think Charlotte and Washington, Bradley Beal in a great spot. Washington's favored at home by 4 points. And they had one hell of a second half against the Milwaukee Bucks. Because my God, Milwaukee scored 88 points in the first half. That's averaging 44 points per quarter. Mind you, we all freaked out. Oh, beautiful steal, Barton. We all freaked out when LeBron in Cleveland against Golden State in the finals scored 40 points in a quarter, and we're like, holy shit, 40 points? That's on average to get 160 points in a game. That's outrageous. That's like, I think the highest scoring game by a team involved like Alex English in the 80s with Denver. Nice move, Barton, going off. Is that it was like 180 something to 180 something insane. And and that, I believe that was an overtime game. And the fact that this, like, Washington, that's the thing with Washington, is that if you're playing Washington, man, you shouldn't expect any defense to be played against you. And you should definitely expect quite a bit of pace. We're starting to see this Washington team play a little bit more competitively. I think especially that's going to be the case if that was just bad defensive play right there by me using Eric Paschal. But Washington's just going to be an exciting team to watch. For, if you're just a fan of the NBA and watching not necessarily good basketball, but good offensive basketball, always watch the Washington Wizards. I think that's a team that's always fun to watch. That's what makes the NBA fun, right? Is that when the NFL has a shitty team, that team could just get destroyed every game and stuff like that. I think the Dolphins were kind of like a Washington this year, to where the Dolphins were eventually able to put up points against other teams, like with Fitzpatrick playing quarterback, Fitzmagic. With Washington, with the NBA, is that when you do have bad teams, it can still be exciting to watch. Like an Atlanta Hawks team this year, Trae Young, even if they lose by 10 or 15, Trae Young could have 50 points scored in that game. So you just never know. I think that's the thrill of the NBA. You're going to get the likes of 2 bad teams with Charlotte and Washington. I believe they both have identical records of like 15 and 31. It's pretty terrible. But that should be a really fun game to watch, and I think I might be streaming that tonight for sure. I mean, it'd be better than Toronto and Cleveland. I do think I'll say that the Charlotte Hornets win this one. I say, Washington's a weird team to have favored by 4 points. I would at least pick the spread on that one. I'll pick the points on that one with Charlotte. Just Washington be favored by more than like 2 points is kind of crazy to me. I know Charlotte's bad too, but I don't think Washington's. It's more so Washington's not that good. I think it'll be a solid game at least by Bradley Beal. Could have a huge game. You never know, and especially in this matchup against Charlotte, you never know. Thomas Bryant set up for a great matchup tonight, especially coming off nearly a triple-double against Milwaukee. It helps not having Giannis in when Thomas Bryant's either playing the 4 or the 5. But I think Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier, I think more so Rozier is in position for a better game. He's going to be playing, it appears that he'll be playing as point guard, as Graham's a shooting guard. And to me, when you kind of think about it, if either one of them, whoever's going to play shooting guard, and by default most likely is going to be the one having to guard Bradley Beal, it makes it trouble for foul trouble most likely. So I wouldn't necessarily pick one of those guys over the other if that one player happens to be playing at the 2 tonight against Bradley Beal. So I do think, though, that Terry Rozier could have a really good game if he starts at point guard. Devontae Graham could easily have a really good game if he starts at point guard. But I do think Charlotte's going to win tonight. Underdog, I'll pick them as the team to at least cover the spread. I think they'll win it too. So I like that. It'll be a fun game to watch regardless of 2 terrible teams that do not play any defense whatsoever. So looking forward to it. This game's pretty lopsided. Cleveland will be hosting the Toronto Raptors. Toronto pretty much at full strength besides Marc Gasol. And honestly, even if they are missing Van Vliet and Gasol, it's still most likely going to be a blowout unless you get like a really good game by Tristan Thompson or Larry Nance, and especially by Kevin Love if this game stays close. It is a tougher matchup for Love than like Tristan Thompson. Serge Ibaka is definitely easier to play against than a Marc Gasol, as we've seen with nice block right there, Jarrett Allen, and a terrible pass. It's Jarrett Allen for you, folks. I don't know why I drafted him in the 3rd round. I thought maybe he'd show some promise right there. But whatever. We'll deal with it. Next up, Philadelphia, favored by 7. And like I predict, quite easily, Toronto is going to win that game in Cleveland at 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 Eastern tonight. So far, Charlotte's going to win my prediction, and Toronto should easily win against Cleveland. Philly at Atlanta. Joel Embiid came back, scored 24 points in memory of Kobe Bryant. Playing Golden State, a terrible team. In general, terrible team against centers. And honestly, too, Atlanta doesn't get any worse of a matchup, or any worsened of a matchup for Joel Embiid. I think Joel Embiid should absolutely eat in this game. Especially now that Al Horford's been ruled out. You could see Tobias Harris get a couple extra shots as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Oh, jeez. What the fuck is with this right here and pausing this shit? Whatever, though. We'll leave that be. But, yeah, just, I just expect Joel Embiid to absolutely shit on John Collins' defense in this team. It should be quite exciting to watch Joel probably have his first bounce-back game since injuring his finger and getting surgery on it. And Ben Simmons, he's going to have a solid game most likely. Trae Young defense. And also, too, Ben Simmons tends to do better against teams with who lack rim protection. I know John Collins can get a couple blocks, but it's kind of like the Jarrett Allen effect. Jarrett Allen is perceived as a decent defender because he gets blocks, but, just because you get blocks doesn't mean shit, The Bismack Biyombo is a terrible defender, too, and yet at the same time, the dude is, can get quite a bit of rebounds and can get quite a bit of blocks as well. Doesn't mean he's great at defense. So, I think the matchup's great. I think if this game does stay close, it's most likely because Trae Young and his great amount of usage is going to get shit done for this team. I definitely anticipate Joel Embiid to eat regardless. Damn, Devin Booker being Devin Booker, man. Superstars are just going to be superstars in this 2K game, man. It's fucking crazy. But, I expect a huge game by Joel Embiid regardless. And I expect a ginormous game if Trae Young's going to be putting up shots and whatnot. So it'd be definitely be a nice pairing if you're doing daily fantasy to definitely play Joel Embiid in every lineup that you play. Trae Young, set that group up and stuff. because that would be huge upside if that game stays close, especially because Atlanta plays at such great pace. So, but I do feel Embiid's in. They're playing Atlanta. They're only missing Al Horford. Yeah, fire him up. That team's going to get the win tonight. So Charlotte's going to get the win. Toronto's easily going to get the win. I think Philadelphia is going to win regardless if it's a close game or not. Next up, Boston at home. The biggest, I believe, second biggest favorites on the slate. They're, projected to win by 12 and a half points against Golden State. Golden State, great matchup for Kemba Walker. Jason Tatum's going to be on a minutes restriction. I expect definitely that with Tatum having the minutes restriction, that will help Kemba out the most. I think Kemba's in a great spot. D'Angelo Russell defense is not good whatsoever. And, I mean, if this game does stay close, it's going to be because D'Angelo Russell has to score like 30 to 40 real-life points, especially when you're this much of an underdog. They'll help Boston a little bit on pace. So Boston definitely has the potential for great games if this game stays close against this terrible defensive team in Golden State. Not even Draymond's been amazing at defense this season. And I think Draymond could have a really good game if this game stays close as well. But I do think Boston's going to easily win. You got Ball Sacramento was on the road coming on a back-to-back against the LA Clippers. It appears the Clippers are going to be at full strength. They got Paul George in the starting lineup now. Patrick Beverley's back in. It looks like Kawhi Leonard is going to be in the. In all honesty, I do think, I think it's a good chance that Kawhi is going to sit tonight. I don't really anticipate seeing them two play against the Kings. I think the Kings are a pretty easy matchup for these two. And I think if that's the case, Paul George probable tonight. I don't, just the way they've been resting these dudes, I think he's a full go if he's going to play. And I think he's an amazing matchup. I think it's going to hinder Lou Williams, especially hinder Montrezl Harrell. I think Zubac could have a good game. He's going to have to face Dwayne Dedmon, who Dwayne Dedmon has shown a couple good games and stuff when he starts. But in general, though, I think Zubac could handle Sacramento pretty well down low. They aren't amazing at all, and they're actually pretty bad against the center position. I do expect the Clippers to do really well. I think Beverly's also probable. Like I said, they're most likely at full strength. But I could see... God damn. Fucking Devin Booker over here doing this shit. But I could definitely see Paul George is having a huge game. And Lou will definitely get a bump if Patrick Beverley ends up sitting. But easily, it's going to be an easy win. This is the biggest... I believe, 13.5 point favorites at home are the Clippers. I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, actually, if the Kings are on a back-to-back, I could see this be a 20-point blowout and stuff like that. And who knows? Maybe Paul George ends up having a really good game, even though he's only playing 20, 30 minutes. He could still get you 30 real-life points. So I think it's really set up well. So Kings are gonna easily get destroyed, I think, by this Clippers team. And it's a good possibility that you could bet on, the spread being. You can bet on the spread being even greater than 15 points tonight on this game. Game of, I think, most likely the game of the night besides Charlotte and Washington, just competitive-wise, will most likely be Utah and Denver. Utah is on a back-to-back. Just played San Antonio, and in all honesty, San Antonio game did not go all too well. DeMar DeRozan had a really good game. I don't know if DeMar ended up having a turnover at all that game. Just an impressive game by him, and an unimpressive shot right there by Will Barton. Jesus. But this Denver team, they've really been slacking without having Jamal Murray and Paul Millsap in their lineup. However, though, I think if this game's going to have to stay close, especially for the most part, I don't see Utah getting too much done. Denver is considered the hardest back-to-back in basketball because of the elevation. However, though, I will say that if there's going to be a team that can deal with the elevation change, it's Utah, considering they play at about 3,000 feet above sea level, while Denver's the mile-high city. So it's just a little bit of change. Of course, it's going to be a factor in it for being an extra 2,000 feet in elevation compared to usual for Utah, but at least it's not like a team from Texas or something like that, to where the elevation is just so little compared to, oh, wow. Devin Booker defense! Jesus, this game scared the living shit out of me, and I'm glad it's a good game. It's a good thing playing on the great difficulty on this 2K is that you're not, you have to play an excellent game to really blow a team out. If a team's really bad, you're going to blow them out. Like, AD's team is bad without Derrick Rose, and we saw that last game against Charlotte. But this Atlanta Hawks team, man, when you got a guy like Devin Booker who can score this easily. You remember when Devin Booker scored 70 points against the Celtics? Shit was fucking insane. But for Utah, though, if Mike Conley's not going to sit, I think Mike Conley could have himself a good game. I don't think they're going to be good defensively against the point guard, especially with Monte Morris, or even like a Malik Beasley playing in for the point guard position for when Barton's off the floor. I think Michael Porter Jr. is going to be needed for this game. You got the likes of Joe Ingles in there, and I don't think Gary Harris is going to get much done. And usually when Gary Harris is taken off the court, you're going to get the likes of more playing time from Michael Porter Jr. I know with Gary Harris back, he didn't play nearly as much minutes as he's playing, but still is quite efficient in his minutes. So if he does get an uptick to like 27, 28 minutes in the game, I think Michael Porter Jr. could be a nice little sleeper tonight, especially when they need to have players that can match up against Bojan, Joe Ingles, those type of players. And especially, too, if Jokic is going to have his hands full with Rudy Gobert, to where Jokic is going to have a decently good game, I think, for them, because they just got blown up by Memphis, Memphis is red hot. Memphis looks really good. And I think, honestly, too, the coach of the year should be Memphis's coach if they make the playoffs easily. Oh, man. Coach of the year should be Memphis's coach by far. It's not. I don't think it's in question. This team's won 10 out of their last 11 games. And at the same time, you want to talk about load management but not sitting your players necessarily, is Memphis. They haven't played John Morant, for more than 35 minutes in a game, I don't think. Same thing with Triple J. I mean, both those guys are 19, 20 years old. And you got Joe Val, who hasn't really topped 30, 35, or hasn't topped 30 points in the last couple of games. Is doing really well. Jeez, what a terrible shot. But, this Memphis team looks like they're just, riding really hot. Dylan Brooks looks really fucking good. Has he always been on Memphis? I believe so. I believe he has. But that guy can shoot, man. That guy can score. And he can get you 30 points on a given night. And that's impressive because John Morant is getting double-digit assists in games. Oh, man, that's such bad fucking defense. But in itself, though, man, just this Memphis team is really impressing me. It's everybody knew they were going to be a fun team to watch, but in itself, oh, here we go. Come on, Porzingis, make that move. There you go, boss. 0.8, baby. Needed that fucking win with playoff positioning. Of course, I hate this shit. 2K has the fucking ball hit the rim every goddamn time that this shit happens. Annoys the fuck out of me. There you go. Oh, nice little slide right there, D-Russ. Especially supporting that nice little win for playoff positioning. But yeah, should be an interesting game against Utah. I know we were talking about Memphis blowing out Denver. Denver doesn't look great, so I don't expect Denver to have a huge advantage at home right now. I know Utah is on the back-to-back, but Utah does play in high elevation as well, and I think Utah is a better squad than this Denver team right now. But I will say that Denver gets together. I think it's a good game by Will Barton, and I would bet on Denver taking their points at home against the Utah Jazz. I know they're set up well for a good back-to-back, as most aren't against Denver, but I think Utah, with Donovan Mitchell, with Mike Conley coming back, I think Mike Conley could potentially play 25 to 30 minutes tonight, and I think it'll be set up quite well for a competitive game. But I think Denver, I think Rudy Gobert could have a good game if Jokic doesn't have a good game. But I think Barton's going to have a good game. We just saw, DeJounte Murray bounce back from a terrible game against the Chicago Bulls, to where, He had a great game against the Jazz, and the Jazz, with as long as Conley is on the bench and you have a starting point guard with Will Barton set up as starting point guard, Donovan Mitchell defense is not amazing. It's not really that good at all. And that's been the suffering that Utah's had to deal with, is that wing players have played really well against them. But, in all honesty, though, that's just the case. As always, fellas, take care, peace, and see you next time.